Hello and welcome to episode number 3 of the Curling Legends podcast. My name is Kevin Palmer, and every week during the curling season I'll share a conversation with the players and storytellers from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we'll cover curling from the early days of the slide to the adoption of the free guard zone. And today our conversation is with Art Lobel. Firstly, I just want to thank everyone for listening and remind you that you can also listen from the webpage, but you can also subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher. You can use any number of apps on your smartphone, such as Downcast, Pocket Cast, and a number of other applications. Google Play and TuneIn Radio are also ways you can listen to the show. If you like the show, please rate us or comment on iTunes as well. You can also check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/curlinglegends. You can also subscribe to our email reminder from our main webpage, curlinglegends.ca. There's a link from the top of that page. And also, if you have a friend or family member that would like to listen to the podcast but doesn't know what a podcast is or has difficulty using technology, please help them out and help them listen. I'd like to thank at least one of our listeners for mentioning to me that I made an error in our last podcast. In the conversation with Terry Bronstein, we were talking about his appearance in the 1965 Scotch Cup. He mentioned that they were in Perth, Scotland. I misunderstood that to mean Paris, which made no sense whatsoever. Although the World Championships were played in France in 1971 when Don Duguid won against Scotland. They were played in Megève, France. Not even sure I got that pronunciation correct, and clearly I did not catch that Terry was pronouncing Perth the way a true Scotsman would by calling it Perth. Again, my apologies. I believe that was the first time I made a mistake. It most undoubtedly won't be the last. Always open. If you catch things, please let me know, and we'll correct them. Moving on, as always, I want to thank Jerry Gertz from Curling Zone for assisting with sponsoring the podcast. He provides the web hosting for the show. And again, thanks Steve Lobel for his artwork. He's provided the graphics for the podcast. Steve is the son of our guest today, Art Lobel. Steve and his brother Rob had the misfortune of having to cur with me from, I guess, 1994 through to 96 for a couple of years while I lived in Toronto. Art and Shirley, their parents, became a bit of a second family for me just after university, having moved to Toronto. And they're a wonderful family. I was really happy to speak with Art. We start in his early days in Manitoba. We talk a bit about rural Quebec and the fact he may be the first person to have used a push broom in the Brier. We talk about a number of other stories, and hope you enjoy it. So let's get on to our conversation with Art Lobel. You've almost had like 3 different curling phases in your life, maybe 4, I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's right. I started in Manitoba, but didn't curl a lot then. I curled a little bit in high school and university days, you know. Oddly, though, I went to school with Jim Ursel in Winnipeg, high school.
Well, okay, so let's start. Let's move back. So you weren't born in Winnipeg. You were actually born in a small town,
Virden,
right?
Well, Scarth, Manitoba. Virden was the closest town. Virden, Manitoba. And strangely, Bill Kent, who I ended up curling with a lot of years, went to a couple of Briers with, in fact, was from Virden as well. So we reconnected. And Jim Ursel was at the same high school I was at in Winnipeg.
Did you know each other at the time?
Not really. No, not really. But I knew his skip real well. His skip was in my class, Gene Walker. He went to the schoolboy. They went to the schoolboy finals in 1950, I think, and lost to Bain Seacourt on Last Rock. And you know what? I listened to that game on the radio. They had a live broadcast on the radio for that game. It was played in Hamilton, Ontario, and Gene missed the Last Rock. But anyway, going back to that, I used to follow that team around a little bit because I knew they were good, you know, but I really didn't know Jim that well then. I just knew him to say hello, and that was all. I knew Gene well.
So at that point, growing up near Virden. Did you curl then at that point, or did you really just start getting introduced to the game in Winnipeg?
No. Well, see, I was on a farm near Virden, and I started high school in Virden, grade 9 high school, and I wasn't curling yet. And then my parents moved to Winnipeg. So when I got to Winnipeg, I was 14 then, and a guy on my street asked me if I wanted to go throw a rock. So we went over to the Civic Caledonia Curling Club and threw rocks. That was my first exposure to curling. Played on leather shoes, tried to slide on leather shoes, like all of us. And that was my beginning. No instruction, no nothing, just went out and threw. I had been watching curling. And the other odd thing is, at Gordon Bell High School, one of my teachers was Lyle Diker. And Lyle curled second for Ken Watson. And so I think he was, more of an inspiration to me than anyone else, really, to get into curling, because when I was there that year, I think that was the year they won the Brier. One of the years they won the Brier, but he was only with Ken 1 year, I think.
So what year would this have been then, when you were just like in grade 11, grade 12?
Well, grade 12 was a little later. This was grade 9. Grade 9, and that would be about 1949. Yeah. We used to go over to, during phys ed breaks, we'd go over and throw rocks at the Strathcona Curling Club. And the rush was always on to see who could get the best pair of rocks, because the guys all owned their own pairs, And they had them in cubby holes behind the sheets, so we try and get there and get the best pair.
So people would,
funny.
So what was it? So people actually had rocks that they kept at the club, almost like keeping your set of golf clubs?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. They didn't have matched stones yet. At Strathcona, they didn't anyway. And, or they might have on a couple of sheets, but a lot of the guys had their own stones that they played with. And they didn't mind if we used them.
Did you take to the game right away?
Well, no, not really. I just curled, some of the high school stuff. And when I went to university then, I curled in our engineers league 1 day a week, early Sunday morning at Grain Exchange, which was kind of early for that kind of thing. And, I played in the University of Manitoba Bonspiel, and Bill Kent and I, in fact, played in the mixed Bonspiel at the university and won it. So that was my first win in curling, you might say.
What did you win?
Oh, it was the University Open mixed competition. Not very competitive. Bill was an accomplished curler, and I was basically a beginner. And we had fun playing it and managed to win the thing. That was my first win in curling.
So at that time, was Ken Watson quite well known then within the Winnipeg, just like in the general Winnipeg public? Was he had become a bit of a celebrity? Or how, because how big was curling at that time? As we're talking kind of late 40s, early 50s.
Oh, yeah. Well, Ken had won the Brier about 3 times at that point. So, yeah, he was very well known. Now, mind you, I didn't really travel in curling circles that much, so I didn't hear much talk about it. But, whenever there was anything in the paper about curling, his name was always there. He always played the Manitoba Bonspiel.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Like, was it a case of even people that weren't even that familiar to curling? Like, I'm trying to get a sense of what was the scope of curling and its reach at that era in Winnipeg at the time. Like was it, even people that didn't curl or didn't know a lot about curling still had an understanding of the game? What did it feel like, I guess, in terms of the scale of it?
Yeah. Well, I know, looking at the local papers, curling was covered a lot. You saw it all the time. So it got, Winnipeg didn't have much else at that time. They had a Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but that was over in the fall, and they didn't have much in the way of other sports in the summer, so curling was kind of big in Winnipeg, which is kind of interesting, too, because in 1940, was that 40? Yeah, 1940, I think, was the first year the Brier went west.
40 or 41, I think, yeah.
They played it in the amphitheater, which I lived just a block away from. And I moved later. I wasn't there in 40, but I moved close to it later. But anyway, the interesting thing was the event was played for the first time in a hockey arena, and it was played in March, of course, and that was the only artificial ice surface in Winnipeg. All the clubs were still natural ice.
When you first threw rocks that first time, you were on natural ice?
Yes, I guess I was. Yeah.
Okay. And tell me about the sliding technique then at that point. Wasn't it, so it was a case that you would try to slide on almost a dress shoe on the leather, or how did you guys try to accomplish a slide?
Well, I wasn't that much into it, so I didn't buy into buying special sliders, you know. So yeah, I played on a leather shoe, and I didn't slide very far with it. I couldn't, you know. And I tried to copy the tuck deliveries of the Manitoba players, and I did that, but I wasn't a long slider. I couldn't. It wasn't until years later when I graduated and moved away that I started using a slider. And the odd thing there is, the mail order at Eaton's used to make up felt boots with sliders. Felt boots were the big story then in Manitoba. And I got a pair of them, and the sole, I think, was neolite. It wasn't Teflon. They weren't in Teflon then. One Christmas when I went home after moving east here, I went to get a new pair of shoes, and they made them up for me. And they had some hard material on it, and I said, "What the heck is that?" And they said, "It's Teflon." I said, "I don't want to take it off." I still went back to the neolite. But of course, in those days, the sliding rule was in effect, and if I had Teflon, I was afraid I was going to slide over the hog line, so I went back to neolite.
How did that rule come in? So originally, when guys started sliding, there was nothing, right? There was no line.
Well, that's right. There was no rule at all, and some of the junior curlers were going all the way up the sheet kind of thing. So they passed the rule that, no, I'm trying to think how it started. I think no part of your body or equipment could touch the line.
So you had to stop fully before the line, before you got to it, right? Yeah.
That's right. Everything, body and equipment, everything had to stop before touching the line. And that didn't work too well, so then I think they went to your sliding toe couldn't touch the line. But some of the guys were doing a silly thing. They'd get close and then jump up and skip over the line without touching it, you know, so...
Oh, okay, so the rule was you couldn't touch the line, but you could go over top of it.
Well, guys were breaking the rule or avoiding the rule by jumping over it. So they would say they didn't touch it, you know. So that didn't last too long. And then I'm trying to think what the next stage was. I think they came out, your sliding foot had to stop before it got to the line. And then they got to the point where your rock had to be released before you got to the line, which
just seemed to make the most sense. It's interesting it took them that long to figure that one out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so when you started, that sliding boot was sort of just started to come in, or it had already been around for a little while?
Yeah, I wasn't really into it until I graduated and had the money to buy the right equipment, you know. Yeah.
So who else was coming up at that time? So you mentioned Jim Ursel and Walker, and so were there other guys you remember at that time?
Oh yeah. Well, there were still the oldies like Bruce Hudson and Howie Wood Sr. and guys like that. They were quite famous at the time. Let's see. Now I'm trying to think of the young guys that were just coming up at that time. Jim Ursel and Norm Houck, of course, were the new guys on the block.
Did you get a chance to compete against some of the men's teams, or at that point you were really playing more for just for something to do and getting introduced to the game?
Yeah, well, many years later I played against Norm Houck in seniors. Never did play against Jim in anything like that. He won the seniors a couple of times, but not when I was.
But when you were young, growing up, you just saw these other players. You didn't like the Bruce Hudsons and that. You didn't really have a chance to play in games against them.
Oh yeah. They were just idols for me. I wasn't good enough to play against them. The odd thing is too, I was asked to play on a school team to go to the play-downs for the provincial schoolboys, and I turned it down because I had a paper route. Believe it or not.
And you felt obligated to do your job.
Yeah. That's right. And years later, I would have quit my job to go to a provincial.
And that was to go to the provincial. That was actually to play in the provincial competition.
Well, no. It was just the start. It was just a local bonspiel that qualified for provincials, and I had it.
Well, how'd your team do? Do you remember?
I don't remember. They weren't a good team. They weren't a good team, or they wouldn't have asked me.
So at that point, were you playing front end? Were you just learning the game?
Yeah. I was Even in university days, I played front end.
How were you as a sweeper?
Actually, I didn't really get advanced in curling until I moved to Quebec and started working, and had the time to play evenings and weekends and this kind of thing, because that was a study work when I was at school, And when I got to small town Quebec, Lachute, Quebec, and they saw me sliding with a long tuck delivery, everybody thought I must be good. So I got bumped up to skip right away. And I had no trouble getting people to play for me because they thought I was good, But I really wasn't. I sort of learned the game there and then.
So you look good coming out of the hack, and you seem to have a nice technique, but little did they know the rock wasn't really going to end up where you wanted it. How were you as a sweeper? You don't seem to be like a guy that would have the massive, Popeye forearms and be able to pound it for 3 draws a day, 12 ends, 12 end games.
Well, actually, I wasn't that bad a sweeper. And in fact, in the 70 Brier, the first one I played in, I played lead. So I did my share of sweeping. Yeah. And I swept with one of the best sweepers in the game, Don Aitken. He was the only guy I ever saw that had a power stroke both ways. He just banged it both ways. A lot of guys are strong going one way.
Yeah, you'd be strong going one way, but you wouldn't necessarily have the same power going on the downstroke or the upstroke.
That's the way I was. Anyway, I had one power stroke and a coasting stroke coming back. He powered it both ways. He was a tremendous sweeper. That's Corn I'm talking about, A lot of guys were good with rink rats and that kind of thing, working it both ways, but with Corn, that was hard to do. I remember Don telling me that he had a sheet of plastic on the floor in the house, and he practiced sweeping in the summer just to keep his muscles and everything tuned for it, So he was being ready, early in the year, doing that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know about, we never had lessons, People didn't teach us how to sweep. You just kind of watched others and learned with their technique and tried to copy it. We didn't have good instruction in those days.
So was it right after university that you moved out east?
That's right, 1958.
Now, so why'd you end up in small town Quebec?
Well, okay, I was a target shooter, and I did fairly well at it. I went to the Canadian Championships in target shooting a number of times. And I got the job with CIL and made ammunition in Brownsburg,
Now,
Quebec.
when you mean target shooting, you mean the...
Rifle shooting, yeah. 22 and 303 British. We used to shoot those matches. And I started that through Air Cadets. And I won a few things at it. And when the job opportunity came at Brownsburg with CIL, I took it. So that's how I came east. Then a few years later, I got transferred to Montreal, and that's when I hooked up with Bill Kent. Again, after many years.
So what are the similarities when you think about the steadiness and the what it takes to throw an important draw shot or an important shot in curling relative to holding and firing a weapon at a target?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can tell you what the similarity. One thing might be breathing. When you're target shooting, you have to, hold your breath for a certain point in time and squeeze off the trigger at the right point in time. I think when you're throwing a rock, you kind of want to control your breathing properly, too. I can't say that I was conscious of that, but maybe accidentally I was doing that. Other than that, I don't know. Just line of sight, making sure you're behind your strong eye, that kind of thing. Making sure that you got the rock. What do they call that? I forget your positive eye.
Yeah. And to your knowledge, were you the only competitive sharpshooter / curler, or is there anyone else that held a similar title?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I know of anyone else in curling that was a target shooter.
Yeah.
Can't answer you that.
When you first got to Lachute, you mentioned how you were you had the nice slide, maybe not as much talent as everybody thought, but you started skipping and you actually started. So at that point, what was curling like then in rural Quebec in the late 50s?
Well, there weren't a lot of powerful teams, not like it was in later years. We used to go to Bondsfield in Montreal, though, and we met some of the better teams there, and that's where we got our lessons, on how to play better. And I think that probably helped us more than anything, getting into those fields.
Did it still have the same sense of Western Canada small town community, though, where they'd have the 3-sheeter, lots of the town either curled or it was a social gathering? Was it a little bit like that, or was it more obscure in where you were at that time?
Well, for one thing, in Lachute, Quebec, where I first started to curl, the curling club was about 90% English, and the town was only about 15 or 20% English, so there weren't a lot of people in the town that curled. There was a few French, but not that many. So no, the curling wasn't a big thing in the community. It was largely the English crowd that curled. Now that has changed, of course. Now it's nearly all French there now.
So was it? What's I'm wondering? So even thinking about late 50s, early 60s, was it predominantly an English-speaking game then in Quebec, or were there pockets of?
Yeah. Well, certainly in the western, if I can call it that way, the western Quebec area, which included Montreal and all the way to Ottawa. That was largely English, But when you went to the remoter areas like Lake Saint Jean, and of course Quebec City is not remote, but I mean it's a little further away from that territory. Up there, it was almost solidly French. The Montreal area and west was largely English in terms of curling. And it changed over the years, so more and more French got in.
Were you still on natural ice, or at this point were most of the clubs moving?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, all the clubs there were artificial ice.
And then so you moved to Montreal.
Yeah.
What year was that?
1965.
So at that point, had you honed your skills a little bit at the game?
Oh yeah. I was much better at it. Oh yeah, much better. In fact, we won the provincial mixed in '66 and went to the nationals.
So that was your first taste of national competition?
Excuse me, no, I got to go back on that. It was in '65 before I moved to Montreal. We won the provincial mixed out of the Lachute Curling Club.
Was that the first provincial banner in the Lachute Curling Club?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, they had a big celebration for us and sent us off. And we went to Thunder Bay and played it there, and that's the year that Ernie Boucher won one of his.
Was mixed bigger at that time? Was it because now it seems to have really taken a step back. I mean, it used to be a lot of times it was fairly competitive, and you'd have a lot of the top teams in it. It's and these days it's dropped off a little bit. But back then, how was the mix competition? And
well, yeah, there was some pretty well-known skips certainly in the game, like Tetley and Boucher and Lee Green from Calgary and guys like that. Yeah, they were fairly well-known players in the men's leagues, And I think in those days, though, I don't think we would have done that well against the current mixed team. Tell you the truth. But I think that's true about just about everything.
Every era, teams get stronger, more people in the game. But But it's almost as if the mixed has really taken a step back, I think, in the last, decade or so. So when you get to the Canadian mix, so at this, and you're just in the process of moving to Montreal. So at this point, now you're walking into, a curling club in Montreal. So does this mean now you're known, you've got, or had you already sort of built up a bit of credibility by playing out of Lachute at that point? You'd played against some of the teams in Quebec?
Yeah, I think I got a bit of a reputation out of that helped me get on good teams. I got on to a pretty good team at the Lachine Curling Club, a guy by the name of Bill Armstrong. I played with him for a couple of years. And then Bill Kent needed a player, so we had just beaten him in a bonus bill, so he asked me if I'd play the next year. And that was my big break, getting on with Bill. And we went to the Brier in 70 and 72 with Bill. So that was probably aside from winning the Brier, that was probably one of my most exciting moments, winning the provincial the first time. In 1970, yeah. That was a big thrill for me.
And so at that time, who were some of the other teams then in Quebec around that time?
Carson, no, I'm missing his name. Bill from Lake Saint Jean. I can't get his name now. He was a pretty prominent team, and Ken Weldon from Montreal, Bill Ott, who just passed away this summer, by the way. And interesting little story there, if we can digress a moment. I went to see Bill in the hospital this spring, and he said, my only regret in curling is that I beat Pee Wee Pickering in the 71 Brier. I said, why? And I said, it forced him into a playoff, and he lost the playoff.
In the round robin. So if Pee Wee would have won the...
Yeah. If Pee Wee had won that game against Bill Ott, he'd have won the Brier. And he lost then to Tetley, who then lost to Duguid. That was Duguid's second. Duguid shouldn't have won that, if you look at it that way.
So he actually felt some remorse that Pee Wee didn't get a...
So that's right, yeah. He knew his days were numbered, and that was the last thing he said to me. He says, I'm sorry, I beat him.
Now, so did you find that growing up in Winnipeg, what did you see that was kind of similar about the curling community out in Montreal and in Quebec, and what were some differences? Did you kind of notice anything different about the game, or in terms of the way, anything, like the way it was played, the way it was perceived in the media? I mean, that might have certainly been a little bit different in a big cosmopolitan city like Montreal back at that time.
Yeah. Well, I think the ice was better. A lot of the ice that I played on in Winnipeg was not that great. I think ice in the Montreal area was better. And the game itself, it didn't seem to have the same relevance or importance as it did when I was in Manitoba. People were a little more blasé about it, you know. But although, though, the press in Montreal, I think probably because it started out being a kind of a who's who of who kind of sport, they covered it totally. And if you won a club bonspiel in Montreal, you got in the newspaper the next day with a picture of the winning team. Now, you don't see that now. That was then. You know? But the press treated it with some importance in that respect.
So your first Brier was 1970 in Winnipeg.
70 was in Winnipeg.
Did you still have family in Winnipeg at the time? I imagine. Okay, so that must have been even a thrill. To most people don't say I want to go back to Winnipeg in the middle of winter, but if it's a Brier,
I'd go to none of it.
How big was like at the time? So 1970 Brier in Winnipeg. Yeah, that was Duguid's first victory that year, right? That was Duguid Duguid year when he won in Winnipeg in front of the home crowd. So how did you guys feel at that time? Were you guys how'd you finish up? And was it something that you felt overwhelmed at?
Well, it was a real downer because we thought we were going to go out there and win a few games.
Yeah.
We only won one. And the first game, I think they were experimenting with lighting for color television, and they threw the lights on partway through the game, and it just softened the ice so much you almost couldn't get the rock down to the other end. So then they corrected it a little, and it got better as the week went on, but the ice was tough all week. And the heavy hitters did well. You know, Duguid's team couldn't throw the high, heavy, hard ones. That's probably one of the reasons they did so well. But Gervais was there, and Pickering was there, and Duguid was just better on that.
So did you feel after leaving that, I mean, you were probably a little disappointed with the showing, but was your immediate reaction, I've got to get back to this again? Yeah,
well, it turned out our third decided to quit curling. I was playing lead in that one, and I moved up to third, and then next time we did a little better. But we played, the second one was in Newfoundland, the only one that's ever been there, and we played on pretty good ice. Their ice was really good.
That'd be the first Brier, because coming up this season, they're going to play in Newfoundland again. Yeah.
Yeah, they are, yeah. I don't know if it's the same arena or not, but yeah, that ice was pretty good. We finished runner-up in that one. And
tell me, what was so I remember you told me a story about that Brier about, was it that Melischuk, when he lifted a rock and clean? I love that story. Can you tell that one?
Yeah, you better not quote me on this because I'm not sure it was him. Somebody did that, though. I saw a skip when a rock picked in front of the house and came to a halt. He went out and planted his 2 feet around it, lifted it, and cleaned it. Put it back down and had his player peel it. So I'd never seen that before.
And there's no rule, I guess, that would explain it.
No.
Yeah.
What do you do about it?
Well, and it seems like there was a lot of gamesmanship in the sport at that time. Maybe there always has been and always will be, but at that time, there's a lot of characters I think that would push the rules a little bit. I don't know. Were there other examples like that you can remember where guys would do little things that maybe skirted the rules?
I really can't think of any. No. Everyone that I played against for the Briers are always very up on rules, and no rule breakers that I could see. There's the odd time that somebody would run into you when you're sweeping behind the line and stuff like that, but I don't think it was intentional. And in those days too, the front end could come in and sweep behind the line. The non-throwing team could come in and sweep behind the tee line. I mean, so it got a little crowded.
Oh, so you could actually have multiple people could sweep it?
Well,
no, still only one.
Only one from each team. Yeah, but the problem was they'd come in at a weird angle in a kind of a rush, and you had to make sure you didn't get knocked over.
Do you ever sense that some of the teams tried to intimidate other teams in any way then, or it still felt very gentlemanly, or at that point?
Only in club curling. One in particular, one guy that I used to play against a fair bit, used to clean the ice in front of the tee line when you were throwing a draw. When the draw got close to the rings and looked a little heavy, he'd go up with his brush and just clean 2 or 3 strokes on top of the tee line, and I questioned him on it once. I said, why are you doing that? And he said, well, there might be crap there, and I want to get it out of the way. Well, I said, I don't think you can do that. You can't sweep in front of the tee line, no. Mm-hmm. And he persisted in doing it. And the other thing he used to do, too, same guy, he'd go up and thump his brush vigorously on the ice when he was calling a guard in front of the rings where you can't clean, you know. And I questioned him on that, too, and he persisted in doing it. So on one occasion I went up and said, if you can dump, I can clean. So I went up and cleaned the spot. I risked getting punched out, but I guess he got the message.
Yeah. And that's and so fisticuffs never ensued. You seem like a peaceful man, so I don't know that you'd...
I would have ran out of the rink pretty fast.
In 72, I mean, like you say, you guys ended up runner-up. Was that for Quebec? That was probably a pretty good showing at that point.
Yeah, I think, for a long time, I don't think any other Quebec team had done that well. Ken Weldon lost the playoff to Gowanlock, I think, a lot of years before that. In the period between that and us, I think we were probably the only one that came
Now,
that
back
close.
then, of course, it was strictly round-robin, team at the end is the winner, and unless there's a tie, there's no reason for a playoff. So where did it end up for you guys then? Like, how was there a point there where you saw that you had an opportunity, or was it kind of decided close to the last day, or how did that work out?
Well, I don't remember exactly the game, but around the middle of the week we had a loss, and we played Melischuk, and he was undefeated, and that was a really good team, one of the best I'd ever played against. And they were all over us. And we were 3 up, they were 3 up coming home. And we had the hammer, and we nailed them with a 4 and beat them. Mm-hmm. Now tell me how that can happen, but it did. And I have the feeling that he was trying to finish off the last end early by running a guard back on our stone. And hit it and flopped a little bit, and then we got another one around it, that kind of thing. And they had a rock in the rings all through the end that we ignored. And when we had 2 behind the guard, we threw an open one, thinking he'd hit it, and we'd hit him for the tie, And he tried to make the double when he skinnied the guard, and we had a tap through for 4.
So rather than give you the tie,
yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer for them, which really surprised me. The quality of team they were, that they would make a mistake like that, but they did.
So at that point, you'd beaten them, so you kind of had a leg up in that head-to-head, and then.
And the other interesting thing is, we might have had 2 losses at that point. I'm not sure, but we were close. And here's an odd thing too. It was the night of the banquet, so our wives left before the start of the last end to go and get ready for the banquet. They didn't know we won, and we came back to the.
We're out of it. We'll go and get changed ahead of the banquet.
Yeah. And we didn't know either that they had left, so we get back to the hotel and we're bouncing around happy as hell, and they're looking at us like there's something wrong with us. And some guy walked by our hotel room door and he stuck his head in and he said, "Great win, guys." And the girls looked at us and said, "Did you guys win?" They didn't know it. It was funny. Yeah.
At that point, you went out and they went out, and so you really had to wait for them to lose? Is that kind of how it turned out at that point?
No, well, that was only about halfway through. So we lost 3 games, and they lost 1. So, but we were clear runner-up, even with 3 losses. Another odd one that year too. I'm sorry, I got the wrong year. That was 72. In the 75 Brier.
Yeah, you're jumping in. That's okay. No, go ahead.
Okay. In the 75 Brier, that was the first year they went to 12 teams and brought the territories in. And so we had 2 byes each round. And the territories team had never made it in previous years. They always played in the Alberta playdowns and never made it. So they get to the Brier, and guess what? They beat Alberta. Yeah.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. That was Watchhorn.
The team in 72, who was on that team with you then?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill and I played third, and Bill Kent. I played the third, Don Aitken, and Murray Griga.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Murray only played 1 or 2 years.
And did you guys, so at that era, at that point, you now been to a couple of Briers, what else were you doing competitively in terms of curling? Like, was there events that you could play regionally? Did you have to travel a little bit, or was it still predominantly playdowns?
Well, we had a lot of local bonspiels where the competition wasn't, really tough. We lost our share of games, but we won more than we lost. But the point was, all the local bonspiels played through a week, and you played in the evenings, and the finals would be in the weekend. So you didn't have to travel. So we got a lot of bonspiels in that way. And then to get some better competition, we would go to Dartmouth or Toronto. And the Royal Canadian had a good spiel there, and so did Whitby. The Whitby Dunlop spiel was a good one. So we got our exposure to good curlers by going.
And these
to
were
those 2
cash
events.
spiels at the time?
Yeah. Well, we won. Just to show you, we won Whitby 1 year and won $2,000.
$2,000 for the whole team?
Yeah. $2,000 total. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think back then, didn't a car cost about $4,000?
Well, that's true. Yeah, and Royals did have a car spiel, as a matter of fact, a couple of years earlier to the time that we started going there. After we started going to Royals, they were paying out $5,000 or $6,000 first place, something like that.
So how did the team with Jim get formed then? So, like, at what point did he come into? When did he get to Montreal?
Well, he came in 73, I think, and he worked for Air Canada, of course, and he picked up a couple of guys that he knew at Air Canada, and won the province. And for some reason, they didn't get along too well, and the following spring, he called me up, and he had known about me, curling with Bill. Bill had left at that point, by the way. I missed that. Bill had moved back to Virden.
Okay.
Bill moved back to Virden to look after his family flour mill.
Okay.
So Jim called and asked if I'd be interested, and I said, yeah. So I joined up with him, and then we picked up Don Aitken, or kept Don Aitken, I should say.
Jim, remember you from the high school days?
No, he didn't, no. I reminded him that I was at the same school with him, but he didn't remember me. But we curled against each other a couple of times throughout that winter when he first got there. So he got to, know me that way.
In terms of your goals, like team goals at that point, did you guys focus a lot? Like, did you actually practice at all, or was it mostly just playing and trying to be in like you say, those local bonspiels and cash spiels? How did you kind of approach a season then in the first couple of years?
Well, throwing practice rocks, we did a fair bit of that. Not as much as the guys do now, that's for sure. But, we all had families and, didn't want to take the time to travel around that much. So we played basically local spiels, and as I mentioned earlier, Dartmouth or Toronto would be 1 or 2 spiels a year that we'd go to. And that was about it.
What were you guys known as at that point in terms of the way you played the game? Like, were you... and I don't know, did a lot of teams sort of get put into buckets, like that's a hitting team, that's a draw team? Did a lot of guys play a similar style? I mean, how would you kind of describe your game?
Yeah, I don't think it was much different then than it is now. A lot of the club curlers, of course, didn't do things like corner guards and stuff like that. They were just get out there and hit anything they could see, that kind of thing. But in the competitive circles, though, we played much the same as they do now. Of course, that was pre-free guard zone, so, hitting was more prominent than drawing in those days, which was kind of good because we swept the corn, and having to sweep too many draws wasn't that easy.
So was it almost a case of sometimes you'd want to throw hits just to give your sweepers a bit of a break?
Probably. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
And then, so at that point, you made another trip then to the Brier in '75. So that was with Jim and Don and
Howie Atkinson.
Yeah, and then so at that point, did you feel like were you guys kind of clearly the favorite out of Quebec at that point?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everybody thought we were the team to beat. Well, mind you, 3 of the 5 times that I went to the Brier, we had to go an extra end to win it.
Mm-hmm.
It was always close. And when you play all week, 10 games, all the teams there get better as the week goes on. And at the end, there isn't really one team that's clearly better than everybody else. They're all into their game. Start of the week, you might get a couple of softies, but later on, they're all into their game.
Well, in '77, that must have been quite an event. Were you even extra motivated to play in Montreal, in the Velodrome? I mean, that was probably going to be a pretty neat Brier to be a part of. Were you guys kind of sensing that?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah, for sure. And we had a lot of fan support there too.
Like how big was so I'm trying to think so how big was it for the curling venue?
Seating, it was never full, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what the seating was. Probably around 5,000 or 6,000. It was all mostly above the track.
Mm-hmm.
People were back from it a bit because of the cycling track.
Yeah.
But a beautiful facility, though. I mean, the building was just gorgeous, and the louvers in the roof, made it just that much more spectacular. Unfortunately, though, we got sunlight coming through those louvers in the daytime and softened the ice a bit.
Yeah.
It got a little heavy. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't. I remember you telling me that it wasn't that conducive to great ice conditions.
No, it wasn't the best. It was more of I would say, a hitter's game on that ice. The ice got a little in the afternoon draws.
Mm-hmm.
We played Savage and Wernick in an afternoon draw, and they were trying to finesse their way, and it just wasn't working for them. We gave them a bit of a lesson.
I'm trying to wonder also at that time, who were the ice makers, and what was ice making like in terms of a role in an event?
Well, the ice in the 5 times that I played in the Brier, I never saw the same ice twice. It was always different. And ice makers were good, but I mean, they didn't have the setup time to get it all ready and this kind of thing like they do now. Don Lewis was from Saskatchewan, did some of them, and he was pretty good. But I don't think he was given enough time. He just got there and put the rings on and away we went kind of thing, So it was never that great.
Case used to be historically that the worst ice you were going to play on was probably in an arena, and that's flipped completely now. Where I think in a lot of cases the best ice guys are going to play on is in.
Yes, I guess you're right. Yeah, because they've become so professional at it, and they have the instrumentation now, the temperature sensors and all this sort of thing. And they control each sheet separately and what have you. They control the air movement in the building, all those things.
So in '77, and again that was still just the team that wins the most games wins the event. How did that week go along for you then, especially being in front of the home crowd and everything?
Okay, well, it's quite an interesting tale because I kind of blame the CCA for this. They did a real bad thing. When they went to 12 teams and had 2 byes for each draw, they gave the first and last round bye to the same team. Why they did that, I can't understand. But they didn't have a Warren Hansen in those days to watch that kind of thing, And in '77, we Vinthers from BC, a little bit older team, just a tad older than us, I would say, and they got the first bye and the last round bye, so they played 11 straight games without a break, and they were 8-0 after the first 8 games and lost the last 3. One of them to us and one to. I'm not sure now who it was. Doesn't matter. But they kind of ran out of gas. I think that helped us.
Yeah, just the fact. Yeah, because I can't understand why you would give a team, a bye on each end. That doesn't make any sense at all because they're getting it's a disadvantage for sure.
Absolutely. And we mentioned it the first time they did it, and they didn't correct it the next year. I don't know how long that went on. but it was a real no-no. You know?
So you kind of sense that to some extent maybe you guys were a bit fortunate.
In that sense, yeah. I don't know. We maybe we would have won it anyway. I don't know, but they certainly weren't as capable at the end of the week. I wouldn't think.
As at the start.
They were getting tired.
And is that the Brier that you brought a push broom?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I had one. I think in '75. I had a history of back trouble, and I used to carry a brush with me in case I needed it. And a couple of times I used it behind the line. You know, I didn't sweep down the ice with it, but I used it behind the line. And the other interesting part about that '77 Brier story, I was in the hospital the week before, recovering from back trouble, and I had an epidural to try and clear it up, but it left me pretty wonky. And they almost didn't use me in that Brier because we had a meeting the night before, and the guys voted on whether they wanted to keep me or not because I wasn't sure I could play. And in those days, you didn't have a fifth player. You'd have to play three. So they had to make their mind up, and they luckily decided to keep me.
Do you remember the vote, or was it a silent vote?
Oh, it was a secret
vote. Okay, so you don't.
Well, I was getting better, but I said I didn't think I could sweep, and they went along with that. But luckily, we had two very good sweepers, and they did all the sweeping, the two of them. Fortunately, it was third position, so that was not sweeping. So we had two sweepers for third and skip rocks, only one sweeper on lead and second rock. And
then, so you'd brought the push broom. Yeah, and I remember you telling me that you had brought it to the Brier in '75, but you didn't recall actually having used it. But you had used it in previous years. Was anyone else at that time that you saw actually using a push broom at a club level or a competitive level anywhere?
I don't think so. No, certainly not at the Brier. In fact, when I brought it out on and put it on the backboard, one of the press guys came out and interviewed me about it. He wanted to know why it was there. So, yeah. It was an oddity for sure.
And then it would literally be just a few years later that the Galzo would sort of change and revolutionize that aspect of it. Yeah. Despite the fact the Europeans, the Europeans had been using them for many years, right?
Oh yeah. And I wish that we had switched way back then. It makes a lot more sense. Particularly, can you imagine slams these days with guys sweeping with corn? I mean, they'd have blisters on their hands so big they wouldn't be able to finish the 7-game event.
Well, they'd also have to be putting the broom on the sheet over because there'd be so much curl on the ice. I don't think they'd actually be able to
that's right.
aim down the sheet. So was a push broom? Was there a stigma almost? Was it against the push broom at that time? Like, what was the kind of general kind of feeling about it? Do you think that's what kind of held it back?
Well, I guess no one had really tried it, and. Mind you, we played in the CBC Classic a few times and played against Scottish teams. And we were kind of impressed with what they were doing with the push brooms, but I guess, like everybody else, we didn't want to switch because the image wasn't there, It wasn't the right thing to do. But
do you remember if the Scottish teams back then understood how to put one sweeper on it and try to corner it, or they hadn't really figured some of that out yet?
No, I didn't know anything about that then.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
Well, I still find it fascinating that a lot of this didn't really start to develop until last year. Although I've heard, in talking to Pat Ryan, he talked a little bit about speculation back in the early '80s when Wernich's team was using the brownies. Maybe there was a sense that that you could keep the rock a little straighter, or maybe there was some ability to back it up. But I don't know. Do you recall that when those brownies were introduced and guys started using those?
No, I never heard anything about that being the reason for it. No, the brownies were you're talking about the brownie brush or the rink wrap?
No, the brownie brush when the brownie brush got introduced. That maybe there was some effect that we started to some of that effect that we saw last year. Maybe existed, but the brooms weren't necessarily used in that fashion. Yeah. But maybe a little bit of it was there.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't aware of it.
But you were a trendsetter then, so you. Likely, it sounds like the first to use a push broom in the Brier.
Could be, yeah. Unless there was a Scottish transplant over here in one of the Briers that used one. I don't know.
Could have been.
His team probably wouldn't have allowed it.
So so at this point, you win that Canadian Championship, and then tell us about kind of the world's experience then with the Air Canada. You went over to where again?
Karlstad, Sweden. Well, that was different, and we had never really met that many teams from countries who all spoke different languages, so that was a bit of a barrier. Mm-hmm. And although in '75 we went to Scotland and played in Edinburgh, so we played against a couple of European teams there. I mean, German or Swiss, So we had an idea of what the language problem would be. But interesting enough, though, one of the teams, I won't name him, flipped with me, and he flipped the coin, caught it in his hand, and held it out to me, and I lost. And I noticed a few days later he flipped with another team, caught the coin, looked at it briefly, and turned it over on his wrist, and guess what? The guy lost. So I reported it to the official. I said, I think this guy's doing devious things when he flips, and I think that was the last year that they allowed the teams to flip on their own. The officials started doing the tossing.
Okay, so there's a little bit of gamesmanship then. Story you forgot. Maybe, like you say, not in the Brier, but at the world level. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so was it a? So I'm trying to recall. How did you guys finish in that?
Well, I guess we tied for second and played Scotland in the semifinal. It was final in those days, and we defeated Scotland and then played a young team from Sweden, skipped by Ragnar Camp, and we were the old one up without coming home syndrome. One of the worst situations I've ever been in curling ever. I hated that. I'd rather be one down with than one up without. Anyway, I missed a shot, and they got two. So that was it. And Jim made a real good draw around the guard, and Ragnar could see a piece of the rock, and I'm not sure if he was trying to peel the guard or hit the rock, but he skinnied by and peeled the rock out. And Jim's next rock pick came up short. So that was it. We were done. Close game.
Isn't there a story with some of the royalty there? What was the story?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, actually, I'd kind of forgotten about this, but we just had our 40th Brier reunion, and Jim reminded me of it. He said, do you remember when we played the first game in Sweden at the World Championships, the arena was packed, and the king came out, King Gustav came out and shook all our hands and greeted us all, sat in the stands for about one end, and then he left. And when he left, about 90% of the fans went with him.
Uh-huh.
They were all there to see the king. There to watch curling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But maybe I'm exaggerating with the 90%, but quite a lot of them left. Yeah.
How did you guys continue after that experience then?
Yeah, well, that's a bit of a sad story because Quebec changed their playoff format, and they used to have 10 teams at the provincial, and they went to 16, two groups of 8. And they had a nice playoff method set up for the top two teams, best of 3, which is fine. But they didn't give the runner-up in either of the sides a second chance. And we went through our zones and regions and the whole thing undefeated until the provincial. Lost one game, and the guy went through undefeated, and we were out of it.
That was the next year?
Yeah, it was 78. Yeah, we lost one game, only one game, and we're out of it. We got beaten by the system, you might say.
So what point did you make your way to Ontario?
Well, that was spring of 78 when we lost the provincial, and then I got transferred that summer. So I left. And Aitken and Ursel went back 3 or 4 times after that. I think Aitken went back once or twice skipping, too. Aiken's been to 9 Briers, and Ursel, I'm not sure, 7 or 8, I guess.
And then, so you make your way to Ontario at this point now. Where are you at age-wise?
Yeah, I'm mid-40s, and I played with the different guys in Ontario. I tried skipping a year, and I did okay, but I just didn't like it, So I started playing with Joe Groka, and Joe had been to a couple of Briers before that. And we had good years, but never quite made it. We made it to one provincial and lost a playoff game. So that's my main success after that was in seniors and masters.
Yeah, I was trying to remember the numbers. So on the senior side, did you win? Was it 4 Canadians?
No, we won 3 Canadians, 6 provincial.
6 provincials, 3 Canadians. So that's still a pretty good stretch.
Yeah, 50-50.
Yeah, and what was the oldest you were at when you won your last Canadian? or your last provincial?
Yeah, I seem to recall we were playing Masters with our seniors team. We were all over 60, still playing seniors, and went to the seniors too that year. 1999, I think we went to the seniors in Sault Ste. Marie and lost the playoff final. So we were still performing.
And did you find going back to the nationals for seniors? Did you find that you'd bump into a lot of the same characters? Did it almost become a reunion a lot of the time that you'd seen in those previous Briers?
No, there was a fair changeover. Yeah, and seniors definitely got stronger every time. You could see it. The first time we were there in '86. There weren't that many really strong teams there, but by the time we got up to 1999, the teams were really good. We played guys like Duguid and Barry Fry with Duguid playing third, and Mazinki, guys like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were good teams.
You're very involved in curling in terms of the organizational side. I mean, you've been involved with developing the Grandmasters, but even before that, when did you start becoming a builder? Or someone that gets involved in the growth of the game. When did that start as early as Quebec, or was that more when you moved to Ontario?
Yeah. Well, I guess sometime in the '80s. I can't remember the exact year. I got involved with the OCA. I was a zone rep, regional rep, and so on. And I did that for 8 or 9 years. And then when I retired, we were going to our cottage in Quebec. The OCA used to have meetings in the summer, and I didn't want to be coming back for them, so I resigned from the OCA. Then 11 years ago, I was involved in getting the Grandmasters started. A guy here by the name of Austin Palmer came up with the idea, and about 10 of us got together and got going. And it's been going really well. We got ourselves recognized by the Ontario Curling Association, and in fact, we're the only over 70 competition in Canada that is recognized by their association. So and I notified all the other associations that we were doing this. And years later, I told them that we've been successful, and we have a website that I referred to that they can go to and look at. And not one of them picked up on it. Now, the problem is you have to find somebody in a province that's willing to take the task on and get it started, because the associations won't do it. They don't want other events, which is bad, and if they're understaffed and they just can't handle any more work. Now, BC is the exception. BC, albeit they have 2 associations, the interior and the coast, but they seem to have a number of these age events on the go. I don't think they've been recognized yet by the Curl BC overseeing body, but they do have a good start going on age events. But they're the only province I've ever heard of that's tried to get it going. I have a friend of mine in Winnipeg, and he heard about it and got all excited about it. I went around to all the clubs in Winnipeg and got no interest at all. They didn't want to give ice or get involved, and he just
well, and it's surprising. So when I looked at the numbers last year, there was actually almost as many teams in the Ontario Grandmasters as there was in the regular men's playdowns. I don't know if you knew that. Very close.
We had around 55, I think. We had 58 one year. No, we're only talking about Southern Ontario.
Yeah, no, but I mean the entire province of Ontario for playdowns had around 60. I'd have to look up the exact numbers, but it was pretty darn close. Yeah.
Oh. Okay,
yeah. So I mean, it's we've seen that drop in playdown competition for a number of reasons, but it's really impressive that you managed to get get the old guys and gals out. It does seem like something you would think in Western Canada for with all the history that would be there'd be interest, and so maybe it could start to take off.
There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest there because we've got 3 so-called major leagues, 70 and over here in the northern end of the city. And we've got a couple of over 80 leagues. Mm-hmm. And, there's all kinds of people that want to curl at that age. We had a guy in our provincials 2 years ago who was 89 years of age playing lead with a stick. And guess what? He started to curl at 86. There's a World War II veteran. Yeah. Nothing to do and lost a lot of his buddies, so he joined the curling club. And at that age, it made sense to start with a stick, and he's loving it. He said, I got 340 new friends. In fact, we we feature him he's kind of our poster boy on our website. Our website, by the way, I should give it to you. I don't know if you've looked at it, but it's grandmasterscurling.com. All one word, Grandmasters Curling.
Yeah, I've seen it, but I thought that was well placed that you put that plug in there. That was good.
Hey, there's another plug I want to put in too.
Sure. This is your chance.
The other one is the other one is ottawacurling.com. Have you ever looked at that one?
Not sure that I have, but tell us about it.
No, okay. Marion DuPont, who's a member of the Governor General's Club, of which I'm a member as well, runs that one, and she does it all on her own. She doesn't get any sponsor money or anything else, and she lists results of every possible event going on in the world. OCA, CCA, World Curling events. All you have to do is go on her website and click on a little blue link or something. It takes you right to the event. You don't have to go through the hassle of trying to find anything in the CCA website or what have you. And she has all kinds of local stuff there too, like bantam, bantam spiel and pictures of the kids that won and stuff like that. So it's a good thing for Ottawa locally too. But everybody in the province is going to it to get fast information on how to get to events. It's amazing. In fact, I'm trying to get Toronto Curling Association here to start one, but I haven't had any luck so far.
Well, it's funny. I think when I met you, Art, I think you'd already retired from your job, but clearly you still have never retired from curling and probably never will, I assume.
Well, no, I think one of the things that keeps me going is the chance to play mixed with Shirley once a week, and I play Senators at the club. I don't really enjoy playing with the stick. It works, but it's kind of a downer for me somehow. Mm-hmm. I do it because I have to, but I don't really like it. And you get the odd guy saying, when you make a double takeout or something, they'll say, you never would have made that without the stick, but they totally miss the fact that I missed my last 3 draws. Yeah. They don't notice that. There's goods and bads to the stick.
Yeah. Well, hey, this has been a nice chat. Did you enjoy this?
Oh, yeah, sure. Hey, one other thing. I don't know if you're interested in this, but when I first got to Quebec, I got introduced to something that I didn't know existed. It was the branch of the Royal Caledonia Curling Club. The Royal Caledonia Curling Club of Scotland is kind of the mother club of curling. And the Canadian branch of that association was formed in 1852, I think. And they have a series of events that is much like tankard playdowns and Governor General's playdowns, double rink competitions and so on. Have been going on for years. And the odd thing is, the branch doesn't take over the whole province of Quebec. It starts around Trois-Rivières and goes west, ends up in eastern Ontario, Cornwall and Arnprior and all these places in Ottawa, of course, are all in the branch. And they have their separate competitions. And until 1950, they were playing with irons. Have you ever seen a curling iron?
I have seen one, not in action. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't tried one. I had a whole set of them, as a matter of fact. I picked them up at an auction sale, and I gave them all away. But they're a collector's item. But irons weighed about 70 pounds. And I talked to a guy who had used one recently. He had one, and he takes it out to the rink every spring and throws a few shots with it. And I said, do me a favor, time the rock and tell me how long it takes to get to the other end. I was really curious because it's so heavy, and you have to really slug it to get it there, And so he threw a granite, and it timed 25 seconds to the tee. And then he threw an iron, and guess how long it took?
I'm trying to think. And you know what? I'm an engineering grad from University of Manitoba. I should probably be able to figure this out.
That's what I said. Yeah. That's what I said.
And I'm thinking, I don't know.
I had no idea.
I'll say 25 seconds. I'm going to say the same.
Yeah. Okay. No. 14 seconds.
14 seconds. That's what.
14 seconds.
Wow.
You had to really slug them, and with the weight, I guess, I don't know. They slow down really quick. So that's why the game was really a hitting game with irons. Yeah. It was kind of a push and shove game.
Yeah. I wonder what the surface on the bottom was like as well.
Yeah.
Right?
He said he polished it real well, but I don't know. You're right. It might have been a bit pitted. Who knows? Yeah. But I've heard people who used to use them, and they said that. They said you didn't slide out with them because you had to throw them so hard you couldn't keep up to them, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
But the other odd thing is the irons were started. Am I boring you with this?
No. This is exactly this is exactly the stuff that we want to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, the irons were invented by the Scottish militia in the late 1700s in Quebec City because they ordered granites and the boat sank. So, granites from Scotland, that is. And so they melted down cannons and cannonballs and made these kettle-shaped irons. And eventually a foundry or a couple of foundries in Quebec and Ottawa picked up on it and made sets for curling clubs. So they were used in curling clubs until about 1950. They had a ladies' iron that was about half the size of a men's iron, and probably about half the weight. I've never really had a chance to weigh one. So ladies had a lighter iron to throw. Now the odd thing that comes out of all this, in the early days of the Brier, when teams from Quebec and Ontario went to the Brier, they seemed to all come from areas that were not using irons. The Quebec City had most of the teams going to the early Briers because they were using granites. And even though irons were originated in Quebec City, they didn't keep them. It was the rest of the province and eastern Ontario that kept on using them. So it makes me think that the reason for those teams coming from Quebec City and Toronto area in the Ontario scene was because they were playing with granites and could qualify with granites.
The Royal Caledonian, is that within Canada? There's still an organization here, or is that since...
Oh, yeah. The branch of the Royal Caledonia Curling Club is still very active. They have their own competitions. I played in a lot of them. They have double rink, they have mixed, they have single rink championships and so on. And back in the day, they were as highly regarded as the British consuls played on.
Stephen had explained to me one time about his take on the history of drag.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the action where rocks move in mysterious ways. So tell me your understanding and some of the stuff you had done years ago. What's your history with it?
Well, going back to the days when I started playing with Bill Kent, that was 1968, 69, we knew there was something going on in that area, and we started experimenting with it. So Bill and Don Aitken and I would go out and set up different scenarios with rocks sitting, frozen and an inch or two apart, and hitting them at an angle and observing what they do. And they do opposite to what you would normally expect. If you have two rocks sitting a foot apart, you would hit a certain side to make the back one go a certain direction. But when they're close to each other, it's an opposite effect. You have to hit the other side of the rock to get it to drag the other way. So we went through a lot of that at that time and had a pretty good idea of what was going on. And we're not sure how many other people at the time were aware of it. Nobody talked about it. I think it was kind of a mysterious thing. And we know for sure that some people were not aware of it because they missed shots on account of it. They'd look surprised when a rock went a different way. So we just happened to catch on to it early, I guess.
And what year was that? Do you recall that you started testing
I'm trying to remember. I went to the Brier with Bill in the 70s, so it was before that. It had to be 68, 69, that season when we got together. And this got passed on over the years. Then when I curled with Jim Ursel, we did the same thing. We experimented with it. And whenever I coached a junior team or a ladies team, we would talk about it, go out and try different setups, to see how it worked. So it got to be pretty well known as time went on. But it was odd that it never really hit the airwaves until just 2 or 3 years ago. People started talking about it. In fact, Kevin Martin, just the other day, I was listening to Kevin Martin talking about drag on a TV slam game, and he said if rocks are 4 inches apart, there's no drag. Well, I guess we never tried anything that far apart, but he's probably right. You reach a point where it gets the opposite effect.
Well, I imagine he also may have tested it as well at some point.
Yeah, that's right. The way he said it made me feel he's done some work on this, and he's probably going to write a book on it.
But to your knowledge, back in 68, 69, no one was talking about this. It wasn't something you guys saw it as an advantage that maybe as you moved rocks around in the house, you'd have an advantage over other teams if you knew how they were supposed to behave.
We thought it was our own dark secret, We didn't talk to people about it. And we knew that some of the other teams we played against were not aware of it.
And the term drag, so did you guys actually use that term?
I think we did, because it was kind of a natural term. That's what happens is the back rock does drag in opposite direction. No, I think I've heard other people refer to it as deflection or pull and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But drag was what we used.
Now, being an engineer, did you ever use any formulas or calculations to try to figure it out, or no, you just tested it?
Yeah, we just tested it. I wish we had, Kevin. I should have spent more time on it.
There's still time. You could just get out your...
Are you kidding?
You still have your abacus?
Just last week, I played that particular shot twice in a club game.
Yeah.
And missed one and made one, so I had one right and one wrong. Because you never know where they're going to go, I'm telling you.
I don't know. Anything else that I didn't ask you that comes to mind?
Well, 3 of our team are in the Curling Hall of Fame. You probably knew that. We didn't talk about it. But
when was the Hall of Fame induction? What year was that?
1979, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 79. Don and Jim.
So you went into the Hall of Fame before you even moved to Ontario. You barely got started at that point, really.
Yeah, I just got here, I guess. In fact, I wasn't even there. I don't even know how the presentation was made. It wasn't like today where they invite you to fly to Ottawa and have it done.
So in other words, you went into, well, it's kind of interesting then. So you went into the Hall of Fame, and you literally had an entire second career after that with, 6 trips to the senior Canadian seniors and all the success you had with Sharples
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I didn't mention the 2 Masters, did I?
No.
We played in we played in 2 Masters and won one.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? I talked about the mix.
Given the success you had in so many of your later years of curling, I'm really surprised that you haven't put out a health guide on how to curl well into your 70s. Right, something on how to eat properly, how to keep yourself in shape, or is it just by accident? Or
well, it'd be silly of me to do that because I don't do it right. I don't do what I should do.
Yeah.
Put it that way. One funny little story though. I was curling in Saskatchewan once, and talking to people there. A lot of the curling clubs in the prairies, in small town prairies, have lean-tos built to the hockey arena.
Mm-hmm.
They curl in the lean-to. And I guess he is the same ice surface kind of thing, And somebody was telling me that the boards weren't too well covered in between the hockey rink and the curling club, so every now and then they'd have to throw the puck back for the hockey players. Came out on the curling ice.
And that was when? What era would that have been?
Oh, that was way back.
Way back,
way back in the 50s. Way back in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Just shows you what can happen.
Yeah.
Oh, another good one. My son was playing in an event, and a guy threw a rock. And he was drawing against 3, and he came out kind of wobbly, and let the rock go and missed it. So Rob thought that they had stolen 3, and he came up the ice. He says, "Just a minute," he says, "There's something stuck to my foot." The hack stuck to his foot, and he dragged it out with him. Yeah, isn't that an odd one? So I got to rethrow the rock, and he made it.
When he got to rethrow it, because that's
okay.
Well,
outside interference. I guess that's the rule that was used.
Okay, interesting.
But imagine that.
I never asked you whether Jim Ursel or Jim Sharples were tough to play for. They had I don't know much about Sharples because I didn't grow up in Ontario, but Ursel had a bit of a reputation of being a pretty serious guy. But I know you've told me before he was,
I think the best way to describe him is intense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but a hell of a good curler,
mm-hmm.
and he knew the game, and he knew how to call the game, and he played to his strength, and he was a winner,
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the best skips I ever played for, but he was he was the best I would say strategist and not necessarily the best shot maker compared to Ursel and Bill Kent, but he really came to play.
Oh, sorry, you mean Jim Sharples? You're saying now? Or
yeah, I'm talking about Jim.
Oh, because you were comparing to Ursel. I wasn't sure what. Okay, so I thought you were talking about Jim Ursel before.
Oh
okay.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Jim
Yeah.
Jim was the coolest skip I ever played for.
Mm-hmm.
He never got rattled. You know, he was always in control of his emotions.
Which Jim now? Which Jim are you talking about now?
Jim Ursel.
Ursel, yeah.
Jim Ursel was he was really cool and never got rattled under fire kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And a real good gentleman to play with too.
Mm-hmm.
He had a lot of class. Bill Kent was another guy that maybe not quite the shot maker that Jim Ursel was, but he was gung-ho to win. Eh?
Mm-hmm.
He would do anything to win kind of thing. You know? Always into the game. You know?
Yeah.
Never let up.
You've always kind of also been known as a fairly amiable guy and like never ruffled any feathers as far as I know. I mean, it seems like you've probably always kind of blended in with teams pretty well, regardless of where you were. You know, maybe that was your strength.
Yeah, I had no problem getting along.
Yeah.
But the other thing, too, is that one thing I never did that I see a lot of top thirds do these days, and all my life, really, I never put the broom down for the skip. Never. No, I always let him call his own shot.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you do that, and they get this thing in their head, you know, well, it's not the way I want to play it, but I don't want to change it, or I don't want my third to think that I'm not agreeing with them, and it doesn't work. You know, it throws them off their game. And then when they miss a shot that you called for them, you know, it doesn't go well, so you got to let the skip call the shot.
Would you offer suggestions?
Oh, yeah. If he called the shot, and I saw something else, I might mention it. Did you think of this, you know? But never call the shot. And I see top thirds now putting the broom down all the time. You know, they don't give the skip a chance to think about it. Now, if you're playing in the club with an old guy that doesn't know what he's doing, okay. But you know, when you're playing with an accomplished skip, you don't call a shot.
Yeah, I'd agree. A lot of times, even a skip attempting the wrong call could be better, conceivably, than attempting a shot he's not completely convinced that he wants to attempt or she wants to attempt. Right? Yeah.
So much not so much the strategy in the shot, but how he plays it, whether he plays it with tight ice and big weight or, you know, wide ice and lightweight kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You got to let him decide how he wants to play it.
All right. Thanks, Art. It was great talking to you.
Guys.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Right. Okay, bye.